The Christmas lights in my living room cast their warm glow across an empty house, each twinkling bulb a painful reminder of promises broken. I sat in my favorite armchair, the one my late husband Robert had bought me 15 years ago, staring at my phone for the 100th time that day. No missed calls. No messages. Nothing from Emma, my 28-year-old daughter who had sworn she'd be here for Christmas dinner. "Mom, I promise," she'd said just 2 weeks ago during our weekly phone call. "This year will be different. I'll be there Christmas morning and we'll cook together like we used to when Dad was alive." Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The turkey I'd prepared for 6 people sat untouched in the rye refrigerator. The dining table, set with my grandmother's finest china and the silver candlesticks Robert had given me on our 10th anniversary, remained pristine and untouched. Even the apple pie cooling on the kitchen counter seemed to mock my naivety. I'd believed her this time. After 3 consecutive years of last-minute cancellations, I'd actually believed that this Christmas would be different. That my only child would finally honor the traditions we'd built together, the ones that had held our family together through Robert's battle with cancer and the devastating grief that followed his death 4 years ago. My phone buzzed, and my heart leaped with desperate hope. Maybe Emma had finally remembered. Maybe there was an explanation. Maybe... The text message crushed that hope instantly. "So sorry, Mom. Emergency at work. Rain check on Christmas? Love you. Emergency at work. On Christmas Day." From my daughter, who worked as a marketing coordinator for a tech startup that had been closed for the holidays since December 22nd. I set the phone down with trembling hands, feeling the familiar sting of tears I'd promised. Myself I wouldn't shed. This was the woman I'd sacrificed everything for. The child I'd put through private school by working double shifts as a nurse. The daughter whose college tuition I'd paid by selling the vacation home Robert and I had planned to retire to. The young woman whose dreams I'd funded by dipping into my retirement savings, always believing that family came first, that love was an investment that would eventually pay dividends. I walked to the kitchen and opened a bottle of wine, the expensive Bordeaux I'd been saving for our Christmas dinner. If I was going to spend Christmas alone again, at least I wouldn't do it sober. As I poured the wine, my laptop chimed with a notification from Instagram. The rational part of my brain warned me not to look, but heartbreak has a way of making us masochistic. I clicked on the notification, and there it was, Emma's smiling face beaming from a pristine white beach. She was wearing a red bikini that probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget, holding a cocktail garnished with a tiny umbrella, her arm wrapped around a tanned man I'd never seen before. The location tag read, Paradise Resort, Bahamas. The timestamp showed the photo had been posted 3 hours ago. My wine glass slipped from my fingers, shattering against the hardwood floor in a splash of deep red that looked disturbingly like blood. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. The betrayal hit me like a physical blow, stealing the air from my lungs and leaving me gasping. There was my daughter, the one who claimed to have a work emergency, lounging on a tropical beach while I sat alone in our family home, surrounded by the ghosts of Christmas memories and the debris of my broken expectations. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time. So if you are enjoying it, like this video, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. I scrolled through more photos with the morbid fascination of someone watching their own execution. Emma and the mystery man at a beachside restaurant, toasting with champagne that probably cost more than I spent on our Christmas dinner. Emma parasailing, her face radiant with joy I hadn't seen during any of our recent conversations. Emma and her companion in matching resort bathrobes, clearly staying in one of those luxury suites I'd seen advertised for $3,000 a night. $3,000 a night. I did the math quickly in my head. If they were staying for a week, That was over $20,000 just for accommodations. Add flights, meals, activities, and whatever other indulgences they were enjoying, and the trip had to cost more than $40,000. $40,000. The same amount I'd given Emma just 3 months ago when she called crying about her credit card debt and student loans. "Mom, I'm drowning," she'd sobbed over the phone. "I don't know what to do. They're threatening to garnish my wages, and I might lose my apartment." So I'd liquidated another chunk of my retirement fund, the money Robert and I had scrimped and saved for decades to ensure our golden years would be comfortable. I'd handed it over without question because that's what mothers do. We sacrifice, we give, we put our children's needs before our own. But apparently, my daughter's needs included luxury vacations with strange men while her mother spent Christmas alone. I poured another glass of wine, larger this time, and continued scrolling through the photos. Each image was a fresh betrayal, a new revelation of how thoroughly I'd been played. The designer clothes, the expensive restaurants, the casual way she spent money that I'd given her to save her from financial ruin. The wine loosened the tight grip I'd maintained on my emotions for years. The careful composure I'd perfected during Robert's illness, the stoic strength I'd projected while navigating grief, the patient understanding I'd shown every time Emma disappointed me, all of it began to crack like a dam under pressure. I thought about all the Christmases I'd spent, alone since Robert died. The first year, Emma had promised to come but canceled at the last minute because her boyfriend at the time had invited her to Aspen. The second year, she'd shown up 3 hours late, stayed for dinner, and left immediately afterward to go to a party. Last year, she'd claimed to have the flu, though her social media posts showed her very healthy and very much enjoying a Christmas Eve party at some upscale Manhattan club. And now this ultimate betrayal that laid bare exactly how little I meant to her, how easily she could lie to my face while planning her tropical escape. The worst part wasn't even the lie itself. It was the casual cruelty of it. The way she'd posted those photos knowing I'd see them, knowing I'd be sitting at home waiting for her, knowing she'd broken yet another promise to the woman who'd given her everything. My phone rang, and Emma's name appeared on the screen. For a moment, I debated not answering. What could she possibly say to justify this? What excuse could she offer that would make any of this acceptable? But I answered anyway, perhaps out of habit, perhaps out of hope that there was some explanation I hadn't considered. "Hi, Mom." Emma's voice was bright and cheerful, with that slight, breathless quality people get when they're trying too hard to sound casual. In the background, I could hear waves lapping against the shore and the distant sound of steel drum music. "I just wanted to call and say Merry Christmas." "Merry Christmas, sweetheart," I managed, surprised by how normal my voice sounded. "How's the emergency at work going?" There was a pause, just long enough for me to know she'd forgotten her own lie. Oh, really stressful. Lots of emergency marketing stuff." "That must be difficult," I said, taking another sip of wine. "Especially with all that ocean noise in your office." Another pause, longer this time. "Ocean noise?" "From Instagram, dear. Paradise Resort in the Bahamas looks lovely. The emergency must be requiring you to work from quite an exotic location." The silence that followed was deafening. I could practically hear her mind racing, trying to formulate an explanation that might salvage the situation. When she finally spoke, her voice had lost all its artificial brightness. "Mom, I can explain. I'm—" "Sure you can," I interrupted, surprised by the steel in my own voice. "I'm sure you have a perfectly reasonable explanation for lying to your mother on Christmas Day. For taking the money I gave you to pay off your debts and spending it on a luxury vacation instead. For posting photos of your tropical paradise while you knew I was sitting here alone waiting for you." "It's not what it looks like," Emma said, but even she didn't sound convinced by her own words. "Really? Then tell me what it looks like, Emma. Tell me how a work emergency landed you on a beach, in the Bahamas with a man I've never met, staying in a resort that costs more per night than most people make in a month. His name is Marcus, she said defensively, as if that explained everything. He's successful, and he wanted to treat me to something special for Christmas. Successful, I repeated. And what does Marcus do for a living? He's in business. Mom, you wouldn't understand. This is complicated. Complicated. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. What's complicated, Emma, is how you could look me in the eye 2 weeks ago and promise to be here for Christmas. What's complicated is how you could take my retirement money and use it to fund your lifestyle while lying about being in financial trouble. What's complicated is how my own daughter could be so casually cruel. I didn't use your money for this, Emma protested, but her voice lacked conviction. Money is fungible, dear. If you used the $40,000 I gave you to pay off debts instead of actually paying them off, then used your regular income for this trip, it's the same thing. You essentially used my money to finance your vacation. The truth of it seemed to sink in for her then, because her defensive anger gave way to something that sounded almost like shame. Almost. Mom, I was going to pay you back. When? After your next financial crisis? After you need money for another emergency that isn't really an emergency? It's not like that. Then what is it like, Emma? Help me understand how my daughter became someone who lies so easily, who takes advantage of her mother's love, who breaks promises without a second thought. The steel drums in the background seemed to mock the gravity of our conversation. Here I was, confronting the most painful betrayal of my life, while my daughter lounged in paradise funded by my sacrifices. I think, I said slowly, each word measured and deliberate, that you and I need to have a very serious conversation about our relationship, about respect and honesty, and what it means to be a family. Mom, please. When you get back from your vacation, I continued, whenever that is, we need to talk. Really talk. About boundaries, about consequences, and about whether you want to have a mother in your life or just an ATM you can occasionally send greeting cards to. You're being dramatic. I'm being realistic. For the first time in years, I'm seeing this situation clearly. I paused, looking around at the Christmas decorations I'd hung with such hope, the dinner I'd prepared with such love, the traditions I'd tried so desperately to maintain. Enjoy the rest of your vacation, Emma, but don't contact me until you're ready to have an honest conversation about who you've become and whether you want to change. Mom, wait. I hung up. For the first time in Emma's adult life, I hung up on her. The silence that followed was different from the lonely quiet that had filled the house all day. This wasn't the hollow ache of abandonment. This was the sharp, clarifying pain of recognition. I was finally seeing my daughter clearly, without the rose-colored glasses of maternal love, without the excuses I'd made for years about her age, her stress, her complicated life. I was seeing a woman who had learned that love meant never facing consequences, that family was a safety net she could exploit without guilt, that promises were optional when more appealing opportunities arose. And for the first time since Robert died, I felt something other than grief or loneliness or desperate hope. I felt anger. Clean, righteous, empowering anger that cut through years of disappointment and excuses like a blade through silk. I walked to my computer and opened my banking website. Time to see exactly how much of my retirement fund was left after years of Emma's emergencies. The number that appeared on the screen was even smaller than I'd feared. At this rate, I'd be working until I was 80 just to have enough money to survive. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was realizing how many times I'd prioritized Emma's wants over my own needs, how many dreams I'd deferred or abandoned entirely to fund her lifestyle, how thoroughly I'd been taken advantage of by the one person who should have protected me. The wine was making me bold, or perhaps it was just removing the inhibitions that had kept me from facing uncomfortable truths. I opened a new browser tab and did something I'd never done before. I researched my daughter. What I found was eye-opening. Emma's LinkedIn profile listed her salary as significantly higher than she'd ever admitted to me. Her Instagram account, which I'd never looked at thoroughly before, showed a lifestyle of constant dining out, expensive clothes, and regular trips to trendy destinations. Her Facebook posts referenced a social circle I'd never heard about. People, with impressive job titles and luxury lifestyles. This wasn't the struggling young woman who called me crying about money troubles. This was someone living well beyond what her legitimate income could support, funding her lifestyle through a combination of her actual salary and regular infusions of cash from her mother's retirement fund. I was the secret ingredient in her success story, the hidden subsidy that allowed her to maintain appearances among friends who probably had no idea she was financially supported by her widowed mother. The realization hit me like a physical blow. I had been subsidizing my daughter's deception, funding her ability to lie not just to me, but to everyone around her. I was an unwitting accomplice in her fraud, a mark so thoroughly played that I'd volunteered for the role. But the anger I felt wasn't just about the money, though that was certainly part of it. It was about the betrayal of everything I'd tried to teach her, every value I'd hoped to instill, every sacrifice I'd made thinking I was building something meaningful between us. I had raised someone who saw love as a weakness to be exploited, rather than a gift to be treasured. The worst part was that I had enabled it. Every time I'd given her money without asking hard questions, every time I'd accepted a flimsy excuse for her absence, every time I'd prioritized keeping the peace over demanding accountability, I had taught her that I was safe to disappoint. Because I would always forgive, always understand, always be there for the next crisis. I had trained my own daughter to treat me like a doormat. But as I sat there in my empty house, surrounded by the evidence of my own naivety, I felt something shifting inside me. The wine, the photos, the casual cruelty of her lies, the years of accumulated disappointment, all of it was crystallizing into something harder and sharper than grief. I thought about Robert and what he would say if he could see how Emma was treating me. He'd always been the disciplinarian in our family, the one who insisted on accountability and consequences. "She needs to learn," he'd say whenever I wanted to give in to Emma's wheedling for money or privileges. "Love without boundaries isn't love, it's enabling." I'd thought his approach was too harsh at the time. Now I wondered if his early death had deprived Emma of the very discipline she'd needed to become a decent human being. But it wasn't too late. She was 28 years old, an adult fully capable of understanding consequences and making better choices. The question was whether I had the strength to enforce those consequences after years of being the permissive parent. I looked at the Christmas tree, at the presents I'd carefully wrapped for a daughter who couldn't be bothered to show up, at the dinner that would go uneaten, at the traditions that had become meaningless without someone to share them with. Emma thought she could treat me like an ATM because I'd never proven her wrong. She thought she could lie to me because I'd never called her on it. She thought she could break promises because I'd never imposed consequences for doing so. It was time to teach my daughter that love didn't mean accepting abuse, that being family didn't exempt her from basic human decency, that treating me with respect wasn't optional. The plan began forming in my mind as I finished my wine and started clearing away the Christmas dinner that would never be eaten. It wouldn't be immediate. The best lessons never are. It would be calculated, methodical, and designed to teach Emma exactly what she'd taken for granted. After all, she'd had 28 years to learn how to exploit my love. It was time for her to learn what happened when that love came with conditions she'd never had to meet before. As I wrapped up the turkey and put away my grandmother's china, I realized that this might be the last Christmas I spent alone. Not because Emma would necessarily change, but because I was finally ready to stop waiting for her to remember what family was supposed to mean. The woman who had spent the day crying over her daughter's betrayal was gone. In her place was someone harder, wiser, and finally ready to love her child enough to hold her accountable. Tomorrow, I would begin planning Emma's education and consequences. Tonight, I would mourn the daughter I'd thought I had and prepare to meet the one who actually existed. The game was about to change, and Emma had no idea that the mother she'd taken for granted was about to become someone entirely different. The morning light filtering through my bedroom curtains felt different somehow, sharper, more focused, like the world itself had gained clarity overnight. I'd slept better than I had in months, despite everything. Perhaps it was the wine, or perhaps it was the relief of finally seeing the truth clearly after years of willful blindness. My phone showed 17 missed calls from Emma and a string of increasingly frantic text messages that evolved from defensive to apologetic to outright panicked as the night wore on. "Mom, please answer your phone. I know you're upset, but we need to talk. This isn't fair. You're overreacting. Marcus paid for everything. I swear I didn't use your money. Please don't shut me out like this. I'm worried about you. At least, let me know you're okay." The progression was fascinating from a psychological standpoint. First, she'd tried to minimize my reaction. Then she'd attempted to shift blame and justify her actions. Finally, she'd moved to emotional manipulation, positioning herself as the worried daughter concerned about her mother's well-being. It was a masterclass in manipulation tactics, and I wondered how many times I'd fallen for this exact sequence of responses over the years. How many times had I been so grateful when she moved to the worried daughter phase that I'd forgotten what had caused the conflict in the first place? Not this time. I made coffee and sat down at my kitchen table with a legal pad, something I hadn't done since my nursing days when I used to plan complex patient care schedules. But this required the same kind of methodical thinking, identifying problems, setting goals, creating actionable steps, and measuring outcomes. At the top of the page, I wrote, "Project Independence." Emma thought she was dealing with the same pushover mother she'd been manipulating for years. She had no idea that the woman who'd spent yesterday crying over broken promises had been replaced by someone with nothing left to lose and everything to prove. My phone rang again. Emma, of course. I let it go to voicemail. The house felt different in the morning light, too. Less like a shrine to broken traditions and more like a base of operations. I walked through each room, seeing them with new eyes. The living room where I'd waited for Emma every Christmas. The dining room where I'd set elaborate tables for dinners she'd cancel. The guest bedroom I'd maintained in pristine condition for visits that grew shorter and less frequent each year. This house had been organized around Emma's comfort and convenience, structured to welcome someone who rarely bothered to show up. But I was done waiting for her to come home. It was time to build a life that didn't revolve around my daughter's broken promises. The first phase of my plan was research. If Emma wanted to play games, she'd discover that her mother had advantages she'd never considered. I opened my laptop and began systematically investigating everything I could about her life. The life she'd apparently been hiding from me. Her social media profiles painted a picture of someone living well beyond her means. Designer handbags that cost more than my monthly car payment. Dinners at restaurants where entrees started at $80. Weekend trips to expensive destinations that she'd never mentioned during our weekly calls. But it wasn't just the lifestyle that caught my attention. It was the people. Emma's social circle included names I recognized from local business journals, young professionals who worked for prestigious firms, people whose families had money going back generations. She was trying to run with a crowd that had inherited what she was desperately trying to fake. That explained a lot about her financial desperation and her increasing demands for money. She wasn't just trying to pay bills, she was trying to maintain a facade that was costing her everything. I pulled up her employment records next. As a retired nurse who'd spent years managing hospital budgets, I knew how to dig into financial information. Emma's salary was decent but not extraordinary, Certainly not enough to support the lifestyle she was projecting on social media. More interesting was her employment history. She'd changed jobs 4 times in the past 3 years, each move involving a slight bump in salary, but also periods of unemployment that she'd conveniently forgotten to mention during her requests for emergency funding. The pattern was becoming clear. Emma would start a new job, use her salary to fund her lifestyle while relying on me to cover her fixed expenses and debt payments. When her spending inevitably outpaced her income, she'd create a crisis that required immediate financial intervention from her mother. Then she'd rinse and repeat with the next position. I was her financial safety net, the hidden subsidy that allowed her to live like someone who earned twice her actual income. My phone buzzed with a new text from Marcus, the mysterious man from the vacation photos. Apparently, Emma had given him my number, which was both presumptuous and strategically smart. If her direct appeals weren't working, she'd try a different approach. Mrs. Patterson, this is Marcus Williams. Emma is very upset and worried about you. I think there's been a misunderstanding about our trip. Could we schedule a time to talk? Marcus Williams. I typed the name into Google and found exactly what I'd expected. A LinkedIn profile for a business development consultant with vague job descriptions and a pattern of short-term employments at companies I'd never heard of. His photos showed him at various networking events and charity galas, always impeccably dressed but never actually working. A professional networker. Someone who made a living by appearing successful rather than actually being successful. The perfect match for my daughter's fake-it-till-you-make-it approach to life. I didn't respond to his text. Instead, I added his name to my research list and continued digging. The more I learned, the more pathetic the whole situation became. Emma was desperately trying to buy her way into a social circle that would never truly accept her, using money. She didn't have to impress people who probably didn't care about her. And I had been the unwitting financier of this elaborate performance, but knowledge was power, and I was accumulating quite a bit of both. My laptop chimed with an email notification. Emma had apparently escalated to more formal communication. The subject line read, "Please don't shut me out." I opened it, curious to see how her manipulation tactics had evolved overnight. "Mom, I know you're hurt and angry, and I understand why. I should have been honest with you about the trip, and I'm sorry for lying about work. That was wrong, and I take full responsibility. But please understand that Marcus surprised me with this vacation. He booked everything and paid for everything before I even knew about it. I didn't use any of the money you gave me for this trip. That money went straight to my creditors just like I promised. I know it looks bad that I posted those photos while you were alone on Christmas, and I feel terrible about that. I should have been more thoughtful. But I've been under so much stress lately with work and my finances, and this trip was supposed to help me decompress and figure out my next steps. I love you so much, and I can't stand the thought of you being angry with me. You're the most important person in my life, and I never want to hurt you. Please call me when you're ready to talk. I'll explain everything and make this right. I promise this will never happen again. Love always, Emma." I read the email twice, analyzing each paragraph like I was studying for a nursing exam. The structure was sophisticated. Acknowledgement of wrongdoing followed by justification. Emotional appeals mixed with strategic promises. Just enough responsibility to seem sincere without actually accepting blame for the deeper issues. She was good at this. Really good. And I wondered how many times I'd received similar emails over the years, without recognizing the manipulation techniques embedded in every sentence. But this time, I saw it clearly. She wasn't apologizing for treating me like an ATM. She was apologizing for getting caught. She wasn't taking responsibility for her pattern of lies and broken promises. She was minimizing this specific incident. And her promise that this will never happen again was carefully worded to apply only to posting photos while lying about work emergencies, not to the broader issues of dishonesty and financial exploitation. I closed the laptop without responding and turned my attention to more practical matters. If Emma wanted to play games, I needed to level the playing field. My first stop was the bank. I'd been thinking about this all morning, and it was time to take action. The friendly teller who'd helped me liquidate investments for Emma's previous emergencies looked surprised when I explained what I wanted to do. "You'd like to move your remaining retirement funds to an account with different access requirements?" she clarified. "Exactly. I want everything moved to accounts that require a 48-hour waiting period for any withdrawals over $1,000, with email confirmations sent to a separate account that only I can access." She nodded, pulling up the forms. "Are you concerned about unauthorized access?" "I'm concerned about unauthorized guilt," I replied, which seemed to confuse her, but she processed the paperwork anyway. The new account structure meant that any future requests for money would require me to really think about them for at least 2 days before I could act. No more impulse transfers during tearful late-night phone calls. No more immediate rescues when Emma created artificial urgency around her financial crises. Next, I visited my attorney, the same one who'd helped me navigate Robert's estate. Patricia. Chen was a sharp woman in her 60s who'd built her practice representing people like me, middle-class retirees who needed protection from various forms of exploitation. "I need to update my will," I told her, settling into the familiar chair, across from her desk. "Of course. What changes are you considering?" I outlined my situation carefully, watching her expression shift from professional interest to something approaching admiration as I described Emma's pattern of behavior and my plans to address it. "So, you want to establish conditions for inheritance?" she said, taking notes. "That's certainly possible. We can create educational requirements, career milestones, behavioral standards, whatever you think might motivate better choices." "I want her to learn the value of money by earning it herself," I explained. "I want her to understand that love doesn't mean freedom from consequences, and I want her to develop genuine relationships based on who she is, not what she can afford to pretend to be." Patricia smiled. "Those are achievable goals, but they'll require careful structuring. We can set up a trust with specific conditions that must be met before funds are released. Employment requirements, debt-to-income ratios, demonstrated financial responsibility over time, all of that can be built into the framework." "How long would something like that take to implement?" "For a basic structure, 2 weeks. For something more comprehensive with multiple conditions and milestones, about a month." "Let's go comprehensive." As I drove home from the attorney's office, I felt a lightness I hadn't experienced in years. For the first time since Robert's death, I was making decisions based on my own needs and values, rather than Emma's wants and emotional manipulations. My phone had been buzzing constantly throughout the afternoon. More calls from Emma, texts from Marcus, and even a few messages from mutual acquaintances who'd apparently been recruited to mediate our misunderstanding. Emma's friend Sarah had texted, "Your daughter is really worried about you. She says you won't answer her calls. Is everything okay?" Even my sister Margaret had called. "Emma reached out to me. She's concerned that you might be having some kind of breakdown. Should I come over?" The web of manipulation was impressive in its scope. Emma had mobilized an entire network of people to pressure me into backing down, each one genuinely believing they were helping resolve a simple family disagreement. But I wasn't having a breakdown. I was having a breakthrough. I spent the evening researching Emma's social media connections more thoroughly, cross-referencing names with public records and business databases. The picture that emerged was fascinating and depressing in equal measure. Most of Emma's successful friends were living similar lives of financial fiction. Credit card debt masked by expensive purchases, rental luxury items passed off as owned. Assets, shared vacation costs presented as individual wealth. They were all playing the same game, all pretending to have money they didn't possess, all desperate to maintain facades that were slowly destroying their actual financial futures. Emma wasn't unique. She was part of an entire generation that had confused the appearance of success with actual success, lifestyle inflation with wealth building, social media presentation with real life. But understanding the broader cultural context didn't excuse her individual choices or make her treatment of me any less unacceptable. If anything, it reinforced my decision to stop enabling her participation in this destructive charade. Around 9 o'clock, my doorbell rang. I looked through the peephole and saw Emma's friend Jessica standing on my porch, looking nervous and determined. I opened the door but didn't invite her in. "Mrs. Patterson," she began, clearly uncomfortable with her assigned mission. "Emma asked me to check on you. She's really worried and thinks maybe you're not feeling well." "I'm feeling fine, Jessica. Better than I have in years, actually. She said you had a fight about Christmas dinner? Maybe there's some way to work things out." I studied Jessica's face, noting the genuine concern there. She really believed she was helping, had no idea she was being used as a pawn in Emma's manipulation strategy. "Jessica," I said gently, "can I ask you something? Do you think it's normal for a 28-year-old woman to lie to her mother about work emergencies so she can go on vacation?" She shifted uncomfortably. "I'm sure it's more complicated than, do you think it's okay to take money from your widowed mother for supposed debt relief and then spend it on luxury vacations instead?" Emma said Marcus paid for everything. "Money is fungible, dear. If I give you money to pay your rent and you use that money to pay rent but then spend your salary on vacation, where did the vacation money really come from?" I could see the understanding dawning in her eyes. Jessica was young but not stupid, and she was beginning to realize that she'd been fed a very different version of events. "I think," I said carefully, "that Emma needs to learn some difficult lessons about honesty and accountability. And I think her friends might want to be careful about enabling behavior that's ultimately destructive to everyone involved." Jessica nodded slowly, looking thoughtful. "I should probably go." "Probably. But Jessica? The next time someone asks you to mediate a family conflict, maybe suggest that the people actually involved handle it themselves. Family dynamics are complicated, and outsiders rarely have the full picture." After she left, I poured myself a glass of wine and reviewed my progress. In one day, I'd secured my financial assets, initiated legal protections, begun comprehensive research on Emma's actual situation, and started planting seeds of doubt among her support network. More importantly, I'd maintained my boundaries despite extensive pressure to give in and forgive without accountability. Emma's latest text message read, "Mom, please. I'm flying home tomorrow to fix this. We need to talk in person." For the first time in years, I wasn't anxious about seeing my daughter. I wasn't worried about her tears or her explanations or her promises to do better. I was curious to see which Emma would show up. The manipulative one who thought she could charm her way out of consequences, or the genuine one who might actually be ready to face the truth about what she'd become. Either way, I was ready for her. The game was just beginning, and I finally understood the rules. Emma arrived at my door 3 days later, looking like a perfectly curated version of the prodigal daughter returning home. Her hair was salon fresh, despite the early morning flight. Her makeup artfully designed to suggest just enough distress to evoke sympathy without appearing unkempt. Even her outfit, designer jeans with a deliberately casual sweater that probably cost more than most people's weekly salary, was calculated to strike the right balance between contrition and confidence. She'd learned to weaponize her appearance the same way she'd learned to weaponize her emotions. "Mom," she said, her voice carrying just the right note of vulnerable uncertainty as I opened the door. "Thank you for letting me come." I hadn't actually agreed to let her come, but correcting her seemed pointless. Instead, I stepped aside and watched her enter the house she'd grown up in, noting how her eyes immediately cataloged the changes I'd made in the past 3 days. The Christmas decorations were gone. The dining room table had been cleared of its formal settings and converted into a workspace where legal documents and financial statements were neatly organized in labeled folders. The living room, once arranged to accommodate holiday gatherings that never materialized, was now set up for productivity with my laptop, research materials, and project planning notebooks. "You redecorated," Emma said, and I caught the slight edge beneath her carefully modulated tone. "I reorganized," I corrected. "Would you like coffee?" "That would be nice." I led her to the kitchen, where the last traces of my Christmas dinner preparations had been eliminated. No more evidence of the elaborate meal I'd prepared for someone who'd never intended to show up. No more reminders of my own naivety. As I prepared the coffee, Emma settled into what used to be her chair at the kitchen table, the one positioned to catch the morning light, the one I'd automatically left empty during my solitary meals for the past 4 years. But I'd moved it yesterday, replacing it with a functional office chair that better supported my back during long planning sessions. Small changes, but I could see them registering in Emma's peripheral vision like warning signals she wasn't quite ready to consciously acknowledge. "So," she began, launching into what was clearly a prepared speech, "I've had a lot of time to think during the flight home, and I want you to know that I understand why you're upset." I poured the coffee and sat down across from her, saying nothing. One of the most valuable lessons I'd learned during my nursing career was the power of silence. People felt compelled to fill quiet spaces, and what they chose to fill them with often revealed more than any answer to a direct question. "The timing was terrible," Emma continued, interpreting my silence as receptiveness. "I should have been more sensitive about posting those photos while you were alone on Christmas. That was thoughtless and hurtful, and I'm truly sorry." She paused, clearly expecting some kind of response. When I simply sipped my coffee and maintained eye contact, she shifted tactics. "But I hope you can understand that this trip wasn't something I planned. Marcus surprised me with it, and I felt like I couldn't say no without hurting his feelings. He'd already paid for everything, made all the arrangements." "Stop," I said quietly. The single word hit her like a physical blow. Emma's practiced speech faltered, her carefully composed expression flickering with genuine surprise. "Stop the performance," I continued, setting down my coffee cup. "Stop the manipulation tactics. Stop treating me like I'm too stupid or too sentimental to see what you're actually doing. Mom, I'm not—" "Yes, you are. You're delivering a carefully crafted apology, designed to minimize your accountability while maximizing my guilt for having boundaries. You're trying to reframe lying to me about a work emergency as poor timing on social media posts. You're attempting to shift responsibility for your choices onto Marcus, a man you've been dating for what, 3 months? Without ever mentioning him to your mother?" Emma's composure was beginning to crack, her practiced vulnerability giving way to something harder and more defensive. "You don't understand the pressure I'm under." "From whom? Your fake friends? Your imaginary lifestyle? Your desperate need to appear successful to people who probably don't care about you anyway?" "They're not fake friends." "Really? How many of them know that you're financially supported by your widowed mother? How many are aware that your designer handbags and expensive dinners are subsidized by a woman who's dipping into her retirement savings to fund your pretense?" The silence that followed was different from the calculated pauses Emma used for dramatic effect. This was the silence of someone realizing that their carefully constructed facade had been thoroughly dismantled. "I've done some research over the past few days," I continued, reaching for one of the folders on my improvised workspace. "Would you like to see what I learned about your real financial situation?" I opened the folder and spread out printed pages, bank statements I'd requested, credit reports I'd accessed using information Emma had provided during previous emergencies, social media posts I'd screenshot and cross-referenced with publicly available spending data. "Your actual debt isn't decreasing despite the money I've given you. If anything, it's growing. You're using my financial assistance to maintain minimum payments while continuing to accumulate new charges. The $40,000 I gave you 3 months ago, it didn't resolve your financial crisis. It enabled you to expand it." Emma stared at the documents, her face cycling through emotions like someone watching their secrets displayed on a public billboard. Shock, anger, embarrassment, and finally, a cold calculation as she realized the extent of my knowledge. You had no right to investigate me like I'm some kind of criminal. I had every right to understand how my money was being used. More importantly, I had an obligation to myself to stop enabling destructive behavior. Enabling? Emma's voice rose, the carefully modulated tone finally cracking completely. I'm your daughter. You're supposed to support me. I am supporting you. For the first time in years, I'm supporting your growth instead of subsidizing your stagnation. I reached for another folder, this one containing documents from my attorney's office. I've made some changes, Emma. Changes designed to help you develop the skills and values you'll need for genuine success and happiness. What kind of changes? My will has been updated. Your inheritance is now structured as a trust with specific conditions that must be met before funds are released. The transformation in Emma's expression was instantaneous and telling. The hurt daughter mask fell away completely, replaced by naked panic as she processed the financial implications. You can't do that. I can, and I have. The conditions are straightforward. Demonstrated financial responsibility for 2 consecutive years, including steady employment, debt reduction, and transparent financial reporting. No more mysterious emergencies, no more lifestyle inflation funded by family money, no more lies about your actual situation. This is insane. You're punishing me for one mistake. One mistake? I pulled out another folder, this one containing a timeline I'd constructed over the past 3 days. Let's review the pattern, shall we? December 2019. Emergency car repair, $3,000. The car you sold 6 months later to buy a newer, more expensive model. March 2020. Unexpected. Medical bills, $5,000. Bills that turned out to be for cosmetic procedures not covered by insurance. July 2020. Job loss assistance, $8,000. During a period when you were actually employed but wanted to take an unpaid vacation with friends, I continued. Through the list, watching Emma's face grow paler with each entry. 2 years of documented lies, manipulation, and financial exploitation laid out in chronological order. This isn't one mistake, Emma. This is a systematic pattern of treating your mother like a personal bank account while lying about your circumstances and motivations. I was going to pay you back. When? How? You're spending more than you earn and accumulating new debt faster than you could ever hope to repay the old debt. You're not building a life. You're building a house of cards that will eventually collapse and take everyone who cares about you down with it. Emma was crying now, but these weren't the practiced tears she'd used to manipulate me in the past. These were the raw, desperate tears of someone whose safety net had just been yanked away. I don't know how to stop, she whispered. It was the first honest thing she'd said since arriving. Then learn, I replied, my voice gentle but firm. Get a financial counselor. Find a therapist who specializes in lifestyle and identity issues. Build genuine relationships with people who care about who you are, not what you can afford to pretend to be. I can't maintain my life without your help. Then maintain a different life, one that's actually sustainable and authentic. Emma looked around the kitchen as if seeing it clearly for the first time, really noticing the absence of the Christmas decorations she'd never appreciated, the replacement of sentimental furniture with functional workspace, the organized efficiency that had replaced hopeful preparation for visits that never materialized. You're really done with me, she said, and for the first time I heard genuine recognition rather than manipulative incredulity. I'm done enabling you, I corrected. I'm done accepting lies and broken promises as the price of maintaining a relationship. I'm done funding a lifestyle that's preventing you from developing into the person you could actually become. But I'm not done loving you. That's exactly why I'm doing this. I reached for the final folder, the one containing information about support resources, financial counseling services, and therapeutic programs designed to help people break cycles of destructive behavior. These are tools that can help if you want to use them. The trust fund will pay for education, therapy, and genuine emergencies, but only with third-party verification and oversight. You can rebuild your life on a foundation of honesty and authentic achievement, but you'll have to do the work yourself. Emma stared at the resources I'd compiled, her expression cycling between anger and something that might have been hope. What if I refuse? What if I just walk away and never speak to you again? Then you'll walk away. And I'll be sad. But I'll also be free from the constant anxiety of waiting for your next crisis. Free from the guilt of watching my retirement disappear into your facade. Free from pretending that an unhealthy relationship is better than no relationship. The honesty of it seemed to shock her more than anything else I'd said. For years, she'd operated under the assumption that my love for her meant I would accept any treatment rather than risk losing her entirely. She was discovering that love, without boundaries, wasn't actually love. It was codependence disguised as devotion. "I need time to think," Emma said finally. "Take all the time you need. But understand that the old dynamic is over regardless of what you decide. I won't be your financial safety net for poor choices anymore. I won't accept lies and manipulation as the price of staying in touch. And I won't prioritize your comfort over my own well-being." Emma stood up slowly, looking around the kitchen one more time. "This feels so final. Endings often do. But they're also beginnings, if you're brave enough to see them that way." She walked to the door, pausing with her hand on the handle. "I do love you, Mom. I know it doesn't seem like it, but I do." "I know you do, sweetheart. But love isn't a feeling. It's a series of choices. And for too long, you've been choosing to prioritize your immediate wants over our long-term relationship. What if I make different choices now? Then we'll build something new together. Something honest and sustainable and genuinely meaningful." After Emma left, I sat in my reorganized kitchen and felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Peace. Not the hollow quiet of disappointment or the anxious hope of waiting for change, but the deep satisfaction of alignment between my values and my actions. My phone would probably ring within hours. Emma would likely cycle through anger, bargaining, and manipulation before potentially arriving at genuine self-reflection. Her friends might continue their intervention attempts, and family members might pressure me to reconcile without accountability. But I was prepared for all of it now. I had resources, boundaries, and most importantly, a clear understanding of the difference between loving someone and enabling their self-destruction. 6 months later, Emma called to tell me she'd started therapy and was working with a financial counselor. She'd moved to a smaller apartment, taken a second job, and begun the slow process of paying down her debt without family assistance. "It's hard," she admitted during one of our carefully structured weekly conversations. "Everything feels different when you can't just assume someone will bail you out." "Different how?" I asked. "More real. Scarier, but also more mine, I guess. Like I'm actually building something instead of just maintaining an illusion." It would take time, years probably, for Emma to develop the skills and perspectives she'd need for genuine independence and healthy relationships. But for the first time in her adult life, she was doing the work instead of avoiding it. And for the first time since Robert's death, I was living my own life instead of organizing it around someone else's dysfunction. The Christmas decorations went up again that year, but they were different, simpler, more personal, chosen for my own enjoyment rather than to create an atmosphere for someone who might not show up. Emma did show up, arriving on time with a gift she'd made herself rather than bought with money she didn't have. We cooked dinner together, shared stories about our separate journeys over the past year, and built new traditions based on who we actually were rather than who we'd been pretending to be. It wasn't the relationship I'd originally wanted with my daughter, but it was infinitely better than the one I'd been settling for. Sometimes the greatest gift you can give someone is the refusal to enable their worst impulses, even when that someone is your own child, especially when that someone is your own child. Love, I'd finally learned, wasn't about accepting whatever treatment someone chose to give you. It was about caring enough to demand their best, even when demanding it was harder than accepting their worst. The real victory wasn't in Emma's eventual transformation. It was in my own recognition that I deserved better, and my willingness to enforce that standard even when it was difficult. After all, the best revenge against someone who takes your love for granted isn't cruelty. It's teaching them what they've lost by no longer accepting anything less than genuine care in return. Christmas had become a celebration again, but this time it was celebrating something real. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.